suggest we start with one at a time because you inspired people.
Hold on.
You know, if you just introduce it as the code says and then ask. you will probably-
Yes.
I know HD.
Yes.
Well, she's coming back on this agenda, of course.
Because I guess it ultimately.
You know, it's great.
Right, and they are. But Alden is gonna stick around for sure. Right. Someone now on the phone? Nope. Weird, I thought I heard someone else. Yep, all right, thank you, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started. Today is August 4th, 2023. It's 2:12 p.m. This is a work session on the executive appointment confirmation hearing for Tiffany. Is it Briggs or Brigg?
Briggs.
Yeah, okay. And then this is AM 571-2023, which is on our agenda for Tuesday, the 8th. We'll go ahead and start with introductions.
George Martinez.
Randy Solt.
Karen Bronga.
Daniel Voland.
Anna Brawley.
Christopher Constant, and over here.
Tiffany Briggs.
Lance Wilbur.
All right, thank you. So as is traditional with our confirmation hearings, we will normally have a member of the administration make an introduction. We'll then let the appointee make an introduction, and then we will start with questions. I think we are scheduled for half an hour. Yeah, so to 2:40. So try on. Mr. Johnson is here on the phone. So as well. So we'll go ahead, Mr. Wilbur.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Assembly. Thank you for this opportunity to share with you some of the opportunity to bring Ms. Briggs on board. The administration is really pleased that when we approached her willingness to step up and be a real estate director, as you were during the previous briefing, as you're aware, the real estate department has two separate divisions. One of them is a real estate division, and one of them is an HLB division. We spoke a lot about an HLB, and Ms. Briggs has spent her last 7 years inside the real estate division. So, brought on board and had a lot of, great mentorship under previous directors. It's been a pleasure working with Tiffany, and well, not only at Community Development, Public Works, but also at the Office of Management and Budget. So we're really pleased that she's been willing to do this. I think that, her experience in my working with her in the last 7 years has really been on when we're dealing with sales of property or unfortunate potentially foreclosures of properties and dealing with titles and all of the things that you would do in the sort of the traditional real estate business. And so she's got, that arm of the business as well. And obviously the work that she's familiar with in the Heritage Land Bank, and Miss Gibney and the team over there have been supporting her in that. She's really, I would say the last two comments I'll make is she's not only good, I think, at what she does in the department, she has a very good relationship with those in the industry and a very good relationship with others, departments that work very close with real estate. Some of them are not so obvious, the utilities being one, street maintenance being another one. It's obviously the ones in planning and development services, traffic, those kinds of are probably a little bit more obvious, but not only her experience in the department, her relationships with other departments, and her relationship with the industry. I think she's going to be a great asset to the department. We're very pleased that she's willing to step up. So I'll turn it over to Tiffany. She can share with you a little bit more about sort of her detailed experience, maybe a little bit about herself, and then, as the chair mentioned, just fire away with some questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Lance. Thank you, Chair, members of the Assembly. A little bit about myself. My dad was in the Army, and that brought us to Alaska in 1985. We were stationed in Fairbanks for the first 2 years before being transferred to Anchorage. My parents rented a house in the Turnagain area, and my mom got a job at Marston Real Estate, which was just up the road in their accounting department. My sister and I would often walk over after school to visit Mom. I loved hanging out at her office, even if she put me to work just doing filing. After a brief stint out of state after graduating high school, I returned to Alaska and began working at Vista Real Estate. And that was in 1996. I worked my way up into different roles with increased responsibilities. My experience there in the private sector and my experience here with the MOA has prepared me for this next step. I'm excited for the opportunity to take on this larger role and bring stability to the real estate department. Thank you.
All right. Any questions? Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, I have 3 questions, so I can either ask them all at once or just circulate through. The first one is, thinking about the real estate department, I'm glad that we will have a real estate director now again, and I know how important that job is. So I guess I'm curious, what's your thinking or approach in terms of maximizing the public benefit for our assets? Because I know that can include acquiring property, disposing of property, and then I know there's the monetary component of that, but I guess I'm curious your thoughts about the other pieces of that too.
Sure, through the chair. Thank you for the question. It is ongoing. We are constantly looking at our inventory on the real estate side of the house as opposed to just HLB. We have a little bit more flexibility as far as acquisitions and disposals. So we're constantly going through the list. Why do we have this? Does it make sense? Is this something we need to do an agency review for a potential disposal of? Through the foreclosure process, we've made quite a few efforts to make sure that we're doing way more noticing above and beyond what's required by state statute. If any of those properties do happen to make sense to keep for a municipal need, looking at that, but making sure that we get those properties back out on the tax rolls. So it's a constant ebb and flow of looking at everything in the inventory.
Thank you. And then my next, and these are kind of general questions. Next one is, I think partly reflecting HLB, but thinking about the municipality and the real estate department. How do you see your role in helping maybe improve relations with the Girdwood community, or at least kind of like building and establishing those? Because I mentioned that not just because of recent projects that have come up, but just I know over the years there's been kind of this push and pull. And then I'll also say, that's not, I'm not saying that's on the municipality to do. It's a two-way street, right? But just curious your thoughts on that or your experience as a staff member.
Sure, thank you, through the chair. I think just re-engaging with GBOS. I know under Robin's direction, there was a lot more involvement as far as going out to the meetings, making ourselves available, and we've kind of gotten away from that in the past years, but we're reigniting that relationship and just making sure that we're communicating. We are starting to go to their meetings again and just making sure we are using them as the community partner that they are.
And then I have just one more, if that's okay. It's pretty much the same question I asked last time, but I think maybe also thinking about the real estate side, and I appreciate the distinction there, Mr. Wilbur, and because I think that's where I was thinking of foreclosed properties and things like that sitting. How do we, the assembly or just the municipality as a whole, how can we partner to really incentivize more housing? And then how can we leverage, I guess maybe leverage the specific function that the real estate department has to get there. And I want to mention too, that could be the properties that you hold, but also thinking back to a project I was involved with a few years ago as a contractor to HLB, helping update a site specific plan. And then there was a lot of, the directive was to find out how to encourage or allow more housing in Eagle River. It was a parcel up there. And then there was a lot of back and forth with the community about what that looks like and density and, those discussions. And so that's just one example, but I know that that's a place where HLB and potentially the real estate department operate. So just your thoughts on that as well.
Yes, through the chair. So the foreclosure process, our office deals specifically with property tax foreclosure. The properties that we ended up taking to auction this year were all vacant land, and not all of them, they all had development challenges. But we certainly look at those as they come up, if it's something that makes sense for us for potential development, a redevelopment. But ultimately, we like to encourage the public also to re-energize those properties. And then there's been a lot of talk lately of the vacant and abandoned registry and also mortgage foreclosures. It's kind of an ongoing communication. We've been talking with code abatement, the code enforcement group, planning, ACDA on how we can help get these properties back out and redeveloped. So it's on all of our radars, and it's something we're working toward.
Mr. Martinez.
Yes, thank you, Chair. First, thank you for stepping up and wanting to continue your service to the municipality. And just on that point that you just mentioned about the vacant and abandoned properties and all the different kind of interest in that space, just a reminder that the CEDC will be really hoping to bring that conversation in. And so I hope we all can learn together about what are the opportunities to redevelop, to develop not only vacant and abandoned properties that have things on them, but also vacant potential lands as well. So I'm really excited about that, and just another invitation. Thank you for bringing that presentation with your staff yesterday to our committee. The question I had really is about, and this is kind of just getting a sense of, you received a recommendation. Can I talk about that? You received a recommendation in an email from Robin Ward. And I think Robin's name carries significant weight here, does with me. And just hearing the way Lance described, you had an opportunity to be mentored by some folks in the municipality like Robin Ward, who speaks highly of you. I would just love to kind of get a sense of what you learned from Robin during your tenure there, which was different than your previous career in private sector as you come into the role of a director for the municipality in this particular role.
I want to answer that one too.
Ooh. You're going to answer what you learned from Robin too? All right, yeah, well, let's go.
Thank you to the chair. I mean, what didn't I learn from Robin? Robin is such a powerhouse. She really showed me the way to navigate through the government process, because that is different when you're coming out of the private sector. How she collaborates with other departments. She knows everyone as well. So it's, she knows who to talk to outside of the muni, who to talk to inside of the muni. I have pages and pages of notebooks of if Robin said if this, emails from Robin. I still call and text her quite often. She was just great energy in our department, and it was impossible not to learn something from her. So I think just how to function within municipal government, and what our goals are. We're the city's realtor, so.
Yes, and just to follow up on that, I think that you mentioned something about the way Robin engaged Girdwood, for example, and then you just came back to this idea of collaboration, relationships, and really the navigation through the bureaucracies to be able to serve the purpose. And I think that it's hard to quantify all the different lessons, obviously, but I think you've hit a few points that are really important to just remember, which are relationships matter, collaboration matters, and you're operating in an ecosystem where there may be other players that are not necessarily linear or one-to-one. And so it's knowing who else to talk to and how to get advice. And I would also say that I think Robin always showed up prepared and all got the information to folks. So trustworthy with information, and somebody you can actually count on in terms of keeping their word as a broker, an honest broker. So those things I think are really good to just highlight, to remember, and to encourage you to keep strengthening those aspects of your role and your performance, so that you're also thinking of the pipeline behind you, the way Robin did as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I have a small slate of questions. I would just also start with saying I think Mr. Martinez and his offer to participate in the CEDC process is good because we're trying to home all of the main government units into a committee process so that folks have a place to go when they have input they want to give to the assembly in a less formal way than an assembly meeting and through a resolution, and to work on developing concepts before they become legislation. And although HLB is not funded by taxpayers, which would argue it should go to the Enterprise and Utility Oversight Committee, I think a better fit is use the whole real estate department, look at it as a whole, and have it go through CEDC. And so I would really suggest utilizing that, being a kind of a regular participant there, so that those questions as they come up can be answered and a relationship can be more fully embraced. So real estate is always such an interesting thing. You know, I have a real estate license in referral status at this time. Mr. Cross has been engaged in the industry for a long time. And we are always accused of any manner of, you know, malintention because of people who I would say come from a perspective they don't want this or that happening near them. You know what the label for that is. So we're always trying to figure that out, which seems to be the challenge of our time, right? And so I hope that you're trying to figure out some ways. You had mentioned more robust public process, showing up more, getting out there as much as possible, some other tactics to help us break down that ossification that we've had in our system, that people who've been around for 50 years think nothing should change and we should keep things for the next 50 years how it was the last 50 years, which mean 100 years of nothing growing, which we can't have as a city. So I think that's my pontification. But there is an area too, one that I don't know, it's the real estate department, but I think for sure between you and Lance it is a thing. We used to have ML&P, and ML&P used to oversee our streetlights. Our streetlights are in rights of way and they're our public property, but we don't really have anyone that we're aware of who manages that utility anymore. So I wonder how that's being managed at this point, because it is a concern.
Through the chair, you are right. It's not directly in real estate, but it is actually combined in two departments. The design aspects of the streetlights that we own or that we're going to build, they are in project management engineering, in project development. So that we have an individual who's dedicated to that. We also have, because they are tightly related to street maintenance, because the services used to be tied to not only the engineering side of it, but the maintenance side inside maintenance and operations, street maintenance. So we have one person, that's what they do. The streetlight business is a lot more complicated than it used to be. And the one reason is that we've got a lot of network and cellular providers that are putting antennas on our streetlights. And so the whole business of leasing and managing all of that, in addition to just the silver stick with a light on it, it's a lot more complicated and a lot more, but we do have one individual dedicated to all of the municipally owned facility streetlights.
So that leasing of space on power poles doesn't come through the real estate department?
No, I don't believe it does. I think we do the leasing of those through this individual, through project management engineering,
Okay,
but we also run the leases through legal.
Right. Okay. So which brings me to my next point, lease processes. So Ms. Briggs, would you describe to us what you think the lease processing is for your job, like how you are involved with land leases and other leases, building leases for the muni?
Sure, through the chair. So usually there's some type of negotiation that goes on between the parties, whether the municipality is the lessor or the lessee, depending on which stage, which person we are in the transaction.
Which side of the deal?
Yeah. But certainly we would negotiate some general terms, and then we come to the assembly for approval.
Right. So then that gets me to the real point. We have experienced of late a process implemented by the municipality where they're using a tool called a use agreement, which is a way of skirting the real estate process, the lease process, and then the assembly, and instead granting major land concessions, leases to buildings, effectively de facto leases, to third parties without oversight from the assembly. And so I want to bring that up to you. I'm not going to ask you to respond. I don't want to get you sideward with the administration because you are the administration, but I want you to know that this is an area of concern for me, that I'm going to be looking very closely at user or use agreements that are being moved forward, being approved, never seen the light of day by the assembly. We're giving away hundreds of thousands of dollars in payments of utilities for third parties who are profiting greatly off the use of our lands. And they're getting the building for free. And I just am having a hard time grasping what is the public benefit of giving away to private corporations these land holdings through these de facto processes. So I have high hopes that the real estate department will be more involved in these processes where the muni is giving away our land. So anyhow, Mr. Salt.
Kind of along the same lines. How do we negotiate better? Because kind of my feeling or my opinion is you have a developer or a party that's trying to negotiate a lease for land and they care. It's their money. And on our side, we have a municipal employee that wants to go home at 5. So, and one example, and maybe not a negotiation example, but we just had the foreclosure sale. And here you have properties going for 10 grand. I mean, that I think you could easily give to a real estate agent and they'd get 3-4 times that amount without even blinking an eye. And again, like Mr. Constant just said, we're it's taxpayers' money that maybe we're not managing properly. So how would you improve upon that process?
Sure, through the chair. So one point of clarification on the tax foreclosure process, we put a minimum bid out and recoup the delinquent taxes that are due the municipality. Whatever it goes for over that, being the winning bid, that's who wins. And the previous owner can claim those funds. But we're not looking to sell the property for them. Certainly, we have worked with some individuals where they are in the process of selling their home and we let them go ahead and finish that transaction and not auction the property. So I've been in contact with several realtors regarding that and all those transactions have closed. But our main job is to not be the realtor for the citizens. They're in the tax foreclosure process. We're charged with getting the delinquent taxes back for the municipality. That being said, they're welcome to sell the property if they would like, as long as they're communicating with us. What was the second? Oh, just negotiating better, is that?
And in negotiating better, I'll use the Holton Hills HLB example. From some perspective, that was a bad deal. Whether it was or not, I'm not going to say, but how do we again negotiate better in transactions like that, or leases like Mr. Constant was saying?
Sure, through the chair. When we're disposing of property, we either HLB has to do an appraisal for fair market value. Real estate services can either do appraisal or get a value based on a broker's value of opinion. So we're also going for fair market value, though. Just a couple different tools. So we're always going to dispose of our property for fair market value. I would expect that when we're purchasing property, we want to do the same, but obviously there's negotiations and doing what's best for the municipality as a whole.
Thank you.
Ms. Brawley. I said we have 5 minutes left in our scheduled time.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate Randy's point about negotiating, and this made me think of a related thing that keeps coming up, which is I know there's some interest and some maybe pressure from time to time for the city to dispose of more assets, or kind of saying, well, we have a land shortage, so let's liquidate all of our land, and I'm not speaking that position from my opinion, but I'm just curious, what is your thought about, I guess, determining current versus future need for the municipality, and then how do you see disposal of lands interacting in our real estate market? Because obviously, if you flood, any market with a product, the price is going to go down. So how do you see the real estate department's role in the real estate market as a whole?
Sure, thank you, through the chair. So whenever we get a request for disposal, we always do a deeper dive into the parcel. was it by patent? Is there some type of deed restriction? What is around the parcel? Is it wetlands? Is there conservation easement on it? So we're always doing lots of background work to see, is this something that we actually want to dispose of? What is the bigger picture for the parcel? So I think we do try and balance municipal need with keeping it for its purpose, or if it is truly in excess. But we will send out an agency review if the real estate department thinks like, okay, well, maybe this is something that we could dispose of. We'll send out an agency review to all applicable departments. I believe it also comes to the assembly. Hey, we've had a request for disposal. Any comments? Or do you guys know something that we don't know about this parcel?
Thank you.
And that kind of brings forward a conversation about an item on our agenda where there's a proposal to transfer lands that are in foreclosure to ACDA. Were you involved in that conversation?
Yes, I was.
So briefly, because we're almost out of time, can you speak to the relative merits or demerits of that project, that proposal?
Through the chair. So what, I put out the agency review for public purpose, which we did with all of our tax foreclosure properties. ACDA requested those parcels for public purpose, and that's the, and then disposal to them. That is the ordinance that's before you. They didn't tell me much about the project other than it fits with their mission and goals of redevelopment.
So there may be some questions coming exactly on that point. What is in fact, the public purpose of that? Because if it's simply to foreclose and then sell, it's arguable if that's a public purpose. It's gray. If it is to continue the mission of ACDA by somehow profiting, that's also arguable, not necessarily going to be truly found to be a public purpose. And so I would actually welcome to see the application or that form that they submitted, because it probably said something about what they believe the public purpose is. But that said, I think practically speaking, it's good to have you here. We're just about out of time. We scheduled a half an hour, which is a signal I think most people have come to understand. And I want to give you the last couple minutes to speak, make a final argument if you want. Lance, either of you, and then we'll conclude.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you again, and thank you to the administration for the opportunity and the support.
All right.
Yes, I would just say that, a lot of the questions that you have here, Tiffany and I have talked about over time. What do we do to dispose of the property? Who's going to invest the changes, the way we can improve not only our communication, but our leasing processes, or all of the things that we haven't had an opportunity to talk about, but definitely things that we have had on our mind, and not only between myself and her, but with other departments, because all of our departments in the permit center have basically a common goal, which is to get and promote development inside the municipality of Anchorage, while we're also sort of preserving the public interest in the assets that we own, that being land. And so that's really important. So we would appreciate your support on Tuesday night. And Tiffany's been doing a great job as acting since June, so we'd like to keep her on permanently.
All right. If there's no other comments, then we will adjourn for the weekend. Everybody have a great weekend. I hope it's sunny and joyful out there for you. We'll be back. This item will be before us Tuesday night. Thank you. We're adjourned. Medium bill. Medium bill. Back to place.